Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Salatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First of all, thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has given us his mercies and blessing today, so we can meet today in the best of health, inshallah. Secondly, salawat and salam always be delivered toward Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And thirdly, I would like to welcome and greet our guest speaker today, Bapak Ramadian Mutomo. Assalamualaikum, selamat siang Bapak.
Waalaikumsalam, selamat siang Pak Dr. Dimas.
Pak Ramadian, before we start, I would like to just inform you a little bit about our programs. That this program actually one of the annual program organized by International Program for Islamic Economics and Finance, Department of Economics, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Muhammadiyah Jakarta. So this program called International Training for Young Islamic Economic Leaders, or ITLs. So this year we have been at the fourth time since 2015. So basically these programs invite so many young future leaders from various universities. This year we collected students from 5 countries, from Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Bahrain, and also from Malaysia. And the program basically is divided into 4 spirited courses, Pak Rama, by the way, whereby one of the course that you are now is the bank and non-bank financial institutions. So during this over the programs, the students basically are equipped by understanding on the role and function of some regulatory institutions such as LPS, BI, Ministry of Finance, OJK, and also some bank and non-bank financial institutions, either from Islamic and conventional perspective. And the program basically ran for 1 month, since 19th of July until 19th of August, inshallah. So over the programs, the students are given not only just listening to the guest lectures, but also they are given assignments, presentations, quizzes, discussions using our online learning management system. So for today, alhamdulillah, the student can see and hear from you directly about the function and the rule of Indonesian Deposit Insurance Corporations, or LPS, in Indonesia. Dear participants, before we start the discussions, it is unfair if I don't introduce our guest lecturers to you today. So our guest lecturer today is Mr. Ramadian Mutomo. Yeah, so he is the senior officer, I guess, from Lembaga Penjamin Simpanan, or Indonesian Insurance Deposit Corporations. If I notice from his short CV that Mr. Ramadian was graduated from University of Indonesia, either from bachelor degree and a master degree, and he has experience for many years in the area of banking and regulations, particularly related with the task of deposit insurance corporations. So, Pak Ramaditya, before you start, that the student basically a few days ago, even until few hours ago, has already listened to previous guest lectures. They had already listened the presentation from Bank Indonesia last week, and yesterday listened from KNKKS Connects, and also just now a few hours ago just listen from KSSK, National Committee for Financial Stability, from Ministry of Finance. So I guess your presentation will complete all the previous presentation and more giving deeper understanding to the students. Actually, what is the main role of the LPS in order to achieve the financial system stability? And for the students and participants, I wish you can enjoy the presentations, and wish in the end of the sessions you will raise some Q&A and whatever that you had in mind, so that you are clearly in understanding what is actually the role of LPS. So Pak Rama, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, and we have around 1.5 hours, inshallah, Pak Rama. Maybe you can just spend 1 hour or less, up to you, doesn't matter. And the rest will be for the Q&A sessions. For that, time is yours, Pak Rama.
Thank you, Dr. Dimas Bagus Wiranata Kusuma. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin sayyidina wa habibina wa syafiina wa maulana Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajmain amma ba'du. Honorable Dr. Dimas Bagus Wiranata Kusuma, our moderator for this afternoon, beloved student and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank to the Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta for the invitation, to Lembaga Penjamin Simpanan, or in English we call it Indonesia Deposit Insurance Corporation, or IDIC in short. Please accept warm regards from the IDIC leadership and management to the Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta Society of Academicians and colleagues. It's been a pleasure for me to be here. I have to be honest, I'm not coming from a Muhammadiyah family, but now I'm actually embracing the life of being a Muhammadiyah, because actually my wife is she's coming from a Muhammadiyah, very strong root, and even the grandfather used to be a teacher. So it's like, for me personally, it's like, giving back occasion, giving back opportunity, which is an unpredictable, or you never predict anything, but then last minute my management asked me to support IDIC in order to entertain the request from Muhammad University. So it's like, oh, okay, alhamdulillah, it's an opportunity for me to sort of like giving back to the roots where I came from, which is actually from my wife's side. But personally, as my experience is that the approach of Muhammadiyah is very practical. This is what I experienced it very well when I was abroad. Probably I need to also update you that I was recently being assigned to Bank for International Settlement, or the BIS in Basel, Swiss. And in that place, of course, I'm a minority in terms of Muslim, and what I see in terms of when to determine the day of the Hari Raya and etc. is always practical, and it reminds me myself of, oh yeah, this is the way that I had way back then, that time when I was still in our home country, and they determined the day as practical, in a practical way. So yeah, without being without further ado, let me start my presentation for this session today. This is the outline of my presentation. I'd like to start with an overview of the deposit insurance system, the reason why we built that. I mean, also of course the historical events that triggered people to see or to realize the needs for an effective deposit insurance system. and then follow with what is being applied in the second segment. I will also share about the deposit insurance corporation in Indonesia in a short, and then of course the financial system stability, as Dr. Dimas mentioned. All of the students has experienced the presentation from the other member of the KSSK as well as the KNEKS, where we also work quite closely. So it's like connecting the dots. So it will be very perfectly. It's kind of like it's a good opportunity for you all here to understand the whole picture of the system in Indonesia, as well as the interaction with the other overseas stakeholders. And I'd like to also updates on the last part in today's session on the international affairs that we've been doing in the IDIC, as well, of course, some other aspect that related to the IDIC in a slightly wider perspective. So please allow me to start with an overview of the deposit insurance system. Okay, the background of the deposit insurance system establishment start way back then. In Indonesia, it started in the crisis in 97, 98. Yeah, you may see here in the slides, the time flow or the milestone here in the left-hand side of the slides. It is actually what is being written by the historical experience of IDIC. And also, I think it's also applied in some other countries if we refer to the 97 and 98. And the banking crisis, we moved back a little bit in the 1970s. We also seen some kind of, 3 examples of, the direct effect or in terms of the graphical, where we use 3 parameters there. And what the point that probably the lesson learned from these is that we all know that this is one of the crises that caused quite a lot in terms of the victim and then the expense, and then even it also caused some political impact as well. So yeah, it's not so fun, but somehow it's quite a lesson learned that we significantly has to pass that lesson learned, which a lot of the parameters there made some thoughts and considerations of if we're going to have another significant crisis the way it happened in the 90s, what should we do better? So moving on to the next slide. This is the perspective. I mean, in a longer perspective, you may see there are several crises that happen in the other regions, and one of the famous one is the one that happened in the 30s, late 20s and 30s, which is the Great Depression, and actually this is actually the one that triggered the establishment of FDIC in one of the oldest deposit insurance corporation in the world. And other crises sporadically happen there, like the tequila crisis, American debt crisis, and of course, the one that we experienced severely is the Asian financial crisis, which is here, if you may see in terms of the establishment of numbers, DIS, deposit insurance, are easily being identified here in the y-axis. So so by the time, I mean, in correspondence to the time that the more we experience crisis, the more we see that the higher needs of DIS or DIC is being established, in every region, in any region in the world. So if we're moving on to the next slide. Yeah, this is a short history about the FDIC, as I mentioned shortly in the past. So yeah, it's the 1929 stock market crash and the Great Depression, and then of course there are some banks which is actually almost similar with what happened in the 90s for us, and then in 1933 through Banking Act signed by the Franklin Roosevelt, the president that time of the US, the Congress created the FDIC to maintain stability and public confidence in the nation's banking system. So an FDIC, probably later I will explain about how close we are with the FDIC and then how significant the FDIC also in terms of establishment of other DIS in the world. So let's move into the next slide. So Dr. Dimas, probably in terms of question and answer, we can have it later, yeah, in the session, yeah, I just to reconfirm that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then, yeah, here's the slide. Actually, the slide talks about why we need deposit insurance. This is a slide that I have actually taken from the IADI, Secretary General presentation. IADI is an association of deposit insurers, International Association of Deposit Insurers. I will explain it later. This slide has been taken from his presentation to the New Zealand, Central Bank of New Zealand, because currently they're planning to establish a deposit insurance systems, believe it or not, despite they're quite established country. Perhaps we all know that in terms of the prime minister very famous, and then the response to the COVID-19 is also very magnificent. But still, believe it or not, they haven't got any DIS system or deposit insurance system in the country. But probably because they never have a crisis, financial crisis. But I'm not sure, we can discuss over it later on. Yeah, the reasons actually of why we need DIs or deposit insurance system is that this is to support the financial consumer protection, because like in Indonesia, probably we all know that there's rural banks or probably BPR or like some other small business in the suburb or in the outskirts of the countries. This is the one that actually need to be protected. These are those unsophisticated retail that need to be protected. And then the confidence and stability is also, this is of course closely related to the historical pictures or the historical graphics that I provided in 2 or 3 slides back. And some advantages is also there because if we have a DIS in place in financial system, we will also, of course, be having a more orderly resolution, a more, accountability in terms of the resolution. You can imagine in the BPN times that time, or IBRA times, like in the 90s, things are not so probably accountable as you may see now in the nowadays. And in the greater certainty, of course, is also one of the aspects where limits, whereby we limit 100% of implicit guarantee, common in many jurisdictions. So yeah, this is also to make ourselves at par or in the same position with other countries in the world, so that when a certain bank or certain investor would like to invest in Indonesia in terms of banking, whether it's Sharia or conventional, if they see that Indonesia is equipped with an effective deposit insurance system, then probably it made their life easier, and then the consideration is more flexible in terms of making a positive decision in investing in Indonesia. So moving on, although there are some pros or advantage, of course there always be the other side of the coin, whether there's limitations of the insurance deposit insurance system, especially during a systemic crisis, because although DIS can reduce incidents of retail runs or bank runs, they call it, it cannot by itself deal with a broad-based systemic banking crisis. It has to be a strong partnership, a strong, co-workship, they call it, and therefore there's a KSSK whereby most of you has attended the session from the KSSK institution, as mentioned by Dr. Dimas earlier. And also a moral hazard. Moral hazard, this is also another homework, as it is also closely related to the law enforcement. And as a DIS, of course, it contributes in terms of stability, as mentioned earlier, but still it is very much subject to the moral hazard risk. And some preconditions is also needed to be there in order to ensure that the effective DIS can do their operational jobs effectively, such as legal framework, supervisory, and then accounting system and regulatory. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, a concept of deposit insurance. A well-designed safety net contributes to the stability financial system. However, poorly designed, this is what I mentioned earlier. Also, that moral hazard arises when parties have incentives to accept more risks than the costs are borne. So again, Indonesia moral hazard is still our challenge, but I believe that currently, based on what the frequent discussion, especially in terms of the KSSK, we are moving bits by bits to reduce this risk towards the ideal position. And in context of the deposit insurance, protecting deposits from the threat of loss insulates them from consequence of unsafe and unsound bank practices. And of course, these are all related to the moral hazard implications. As I mentioned earlier, this is not a position that only be only be taking over or taking care by IDIC or LPS, but this should be something that is being handled together within the other safety net participants, or in this case, or in the Indonesia case, we call it KSSK or Komite Stabilitas Sistem Keuangan. Probably can move to the next slide. Okay, this is still related to the moral hazard. Some key features in order to mitigate the moral hazard include limited coverage level and scope, differential premium, and then timely intervention. These items also, I will also be touch these later on in my presentation about the IADI core principles, because actually the point that mentioned here is not something that is being taken from, from the sky or from some, nap dream or something, but it's actually we have also some kind like a standard, which we call it like a core principle, effective deposit insurance core principle, which is being issued or established by IADI. Yeah, I will be mentioning about that in my later stage of my presentations. So the other part is also still related to the moral hazard, which is actually in Indonesia, we treated that also as also one of the key aspects, which also I will be touch base later on this one, in terms of the principle of what IDIC has been adopted it in order to operate, especially in the resolution function. So moving on into the next slide. Okay. In this slide, I'd like to inform you, or I'd like to share to you about the mandates in deposit insurance. In order to fulfill the previous slide or the previous explanation that I mentioned to you about why we need deposit insurance, of course, there are some options of mandate that deposit insurance institution can adopt. Especially this is closely related to the needs in their financial system. I mean, how mature is their financial system there? And in some other regions, probably, like the EU, they also have some close partnership within their regions, like the central bank. They have a unified central bank, and also the single resolution board, which also applies for the region. So that also impacted the choose of the mandate, that the options of mandate that they have been chosen. So there are four mandates as mentioned here: the Paybox Plus, Loss Minimizer, and Risk Minimizer. This is actually going from the most simple one into the most complicated one in the lowest part, which is in the Risk Minimizer. Indonesia is currently now in the loss minimizer mandate, as is mentioned in the right-hand side of the table. And yeah, on the right-hand side, you can see the distribution of the mandates around the world. This is a very valid or very recent survey from the IADI. So the Paybox is just a simple, if I mention to you, probably I can share to you, the Paybox is like a simple post box office. So it's like, it's like you're doing like something that is being ordered by the other authorities. So you just pay. It's like a cashier. So you just pay the reimbursement of the deposits as if you're a post office, like you stamp and then you pay. And then, or in post office, of course, you don't pay, but you deliver the letter, right? Or you deliver the the message to the recipients. And Paybox Plus, there are some additional function there, and not only just post box, but in this kind of world, it's a financial support, as mentioned in the slide there, and some countries like Argentina, Brazil, UK, FSES they call it, and also even Philippines, they say that they are Paybox Plus. And by the way, Philippines is one of the oldest deposit insurance system in Asia, as they were established not so long after the FDIC. Probably because of the historical reason, between Philippines and US. And then on the loss minimizer side here, the keyword is actually the least cost resolution strategy. So when we are taking care or doing the reimbursement of a saving accounts that that is deemed failed by by the FSA or by the OJK, we do least cost approach in terms of the decision making, whether we're going to provide the resolution, or we're going to we're going to save them, or we just close them, or we liquidate them. And a more sophisticated way is a risk minimizer, which we are actually from IDIC, we're going to embrace, or we're going to adopt this principle in less than 10 years from now. We've already written it in our strategy plan. And the keywords of this is that the risk assessment management, whereby a full suite of intervention and resolution power is included here, which this means that we have the so-called the power, or we are empowered to do the due diligence, or a complete audit before we decide whether we're going to apply what kind of resolution approach towards the ailing banks or the failing banks. And there are South Korea, USA, and Malaysia is not right now adopting that mandate. So moving on to the next slide. I have to check the time. Okay. Okay, moving on. This is the second part. In Indonesia, deposit insurance was established in 2005. As I mentioned, this is closely related to the the crisis in 1997 and 98, and we are accountable to the President of Republic of Indonesia, and we are domiciled in Jakarta, and may open representative offices within the territory of Republic of Indonesia, but up until now we only have one office in Jakarta. So there are the contacts in the right-hand side. Probably some of you haven't followed the Instagram. We are quite active in Instagram. So yeah, just please don't hesitate to follow the Instagram. Okay, and next slide, the function and duties here of the IDIC or LPS is to actively participate in promoting stability for the country's financial system in accordance with the authorized mandate, and to ensure depositors' fund. So there are 4 duties, like to develop policies of deposit insurance, implement deposit insurance program, development policy, so as to actively participate in maintaining the stability of the banking system, develop and implement policies related to banking resolution and non-systemic failed bank. This is on the regulations. And for resolution of systemic bank, we do some bailout. So we have now segregate between non-systemic failed banks and systemic failed banks based on the recent regulations, which I may also touch later on. Moving on to the next slide, this is the structure, organizational structure of LPS. So the ultimate leadership is on the Board of Commissioner. We have 6 members of Board of Commissioner. On the right-hand side, 3 of the right-hand side, we call it an ex officio, which is actually a representative from other institution under the KSSK. And from on the left-hand side, is actually in officio, if I may call it, is actually the chairman, the head of the Board of Commissioner, currently Purbaya Yudisadewa, and then the CEO is Ibu Lana Sulistianingsih, Dr. Lana Sulistianingsih, and the member of Board of Commissioner is Pak Didi Madiono. I myself, I belong to the international group, which is somewhere here. Yeah, oh yeah, that right in the cursor. What a coincidence. Okay, moving on, perhaps. This is, if you want to know by faces, these are our leaders. So it's always good to know not only by name, but of course by faces. And we have also a couple of women in our leadership, which is it's quite impressive, because I think probably even BIS itself, the only in like 10 years ago, I just saw the one of the posts in the BIS, Bank for International Settlements. Even like 10 years ago, there were no ladies in the leadership, but only quite recent. So yeah, I think Indonesia has embraced this principle quite well. Okay, moving on to the next slide, perhaps. Yeah. So this is the history of IDIC. Yeah, 1998, as I mentioned earlier, the crisis, the Asian financial crisis. And then, of course, we have IBRA there. Probably students right now will not quite only know IBRA by textbooks or by by the lecture, I guess. Yeah, but personally, for me, I was already working that time. It was during my initial year of my career in banking. In 1998, I was a personal banker there, and I'm actually doing the queue for one of my prominent client in order to taking some of her funds toward my bank that time. So I actually experienced the sweat and then those kind of experience in the 90s. But of course, I'm unfortunately not in the IBRA, but I also been in active discussion with some colleagues who is working in IBRA, and even now in our leadership, we have also some leaders that actually came from their experience in Indonesian Bank Restructuring Agency, if I'm not wrong. That's the abbreviation of BPPN in Bahasa, probably if I call BPPN. So some of you may recall that name. And then the establishment of IDIC in 2004 and 2005 is actually the operation time, the initial operation after the establishment of the regulation. And we grow year by year. In 2013, there's an establishment of OJK. And then the important milestone is in 2016, whereby we have the PPKSK law there, the establishment of the law on prevention of and resolution of financial system crisis, which I mentioned earlier, that segregate between the systemic and non-systemic. And quite recently, we also had the establishment of the law number 2 of 2020 that related to the state financial policy to ensure financial system stability while handling the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. So next slide. Okay, these are the numbers. I think these are the numbers of the member. The number has been reduced quite time by time, but the reason of the reduction is actually apart from the liquidation of the rural banks in the gray part, is also some merger and acquisition in the commercial bank side. So probably and even recently, I think there are quite more because of the recent adoption of the fintech. Probably, I think all of you may know about that. So the current number per June is 107 commercial banks and 1,656 of rural banks. Okay, moving on to the next slide. And these are the number of deposit distribution. So on the in terms of US, we did the tiering as in the above part. Almost most of the saving type of deposits are in the demand deposit as well as the time deposit. So and also the saving. So those three are the major parts, and binomial are on the right hand side, and this is quite actual number. We adopted it from the Bloomberg. Sorry, we adopted from our research department or our accounting department as per of June, and the rate is from Bloomberg, the exchange rate. So yeah, moving on to the next slide. Thank you. And this is the numbers of the liquidated banks, especially in the rural banks, as I mentioned. We only liquidate one commercial bank and 120 rural banks, which is distributed in the map, in the lower parts of Indonesian map. You may see West Sumatra is the largest one, but of course, this might be moving, the numbers might be moving on, it might be changing in the future as part of the education and socialization that has been actively done by IDIC and also the KSSK. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Yeah, these are the number of deposits. We have around, I think this is in million, yeah. Deposits, total of deposit, total of commercial banks, and then the rural banks. And then what I want to mention here is the eligible deposit. The eligible deposit is 81%, and it's mostly in the commercial banks and rural banks. And rural banks is actually one of the, the most, the majority parts. And apart from those numbers, the total accounts that we cover in terms of the eligible deposit is 90%. And from the ineligible deposit, this is above the 2 billion inside IDR balance. So this is actually around 80% and or 6.5% in terms of number of total accounts. As I mentioned to you earlier about the moral hazard, actually in Indonesia we have applied a criteria as in order to mitigate the the moral hazard. This criteria I mentioned in the lower right hand side, which is the interest rate of the bank should not be above the IDIC rate, and then no cash inflow, and it's not caused by or not causing the failed bank. So in this case, we don't cover. These are actually where it comes from. The numbers of ineligible banks deposit. The number of ineligible deposits is actually contains those that are not fulfilled one of the requirements here, which is one of them might be either the interest rates above the IDIC rate, or in this case, the number of accounts is above 2 million, or the accounts has caused the bank to fail, or in this case, related to somehow doing the misconduct that caused the bank the failure of the banks. So those are the three criteria that is being applied by IDIC or LPS in order to mitigate the moral hazard, which is I mentioned in the past. In some slides back. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, IDIC in the financial stability system. I think this is not going to be a long one, because this is actually the part which might help you in connecting the dots I mentioned you earlier. This is, yeah, the reason regulation, as I mentioned, is the expansion of mandate and authorities, which is based on the law of number 9 of 2016, which is on the crisis prevention and resolution of financial system crisis of the PPK-SK law. So there are 3 new areas in the law, which first is early access intervention, which based on the article of 21 PPK-SK law, we are allowed in order to do the early access or to do the intervention. In this case, we are allowed to do some checkings or audits on the ailing banks once it is considered almost unable to be saved by the OJK. And the second part is the BRRP, the Bank Restructuring Program, which means that we are given special authorities to administer the BRP, or the Bank Restructuring Program. This has been shown by the establishment of the BRP Directorate in the IDIC, probably some slide back, if you can see the organization structure. Probably I can't remember which slide, probably 2 or 3 slides ago, 3 slides back, whereby we have established the BRP Directorate or office recently based on these regulations. And the latest part is the additional of mandate, or the additional bank resolution method, which is the PNA and bridge bank. The details of what PNA and bridge bank are also mentioned there in the slide, whereby on PNA we can do the transferring part or all assets and or liabilities to or from problem banks to assuming banks, or in this case transferring parts or all assets and or liabilities of problem banks to a bridge bank. And this bridge bank is actually one of the responsible of the BRP. Once it is considered necessary, we will establish this bridge bank mechanism in the resolution or in the crisis prevention effort of IDIC. So moving on to the next slide. This is where IDIC or LPS in the financial system. As I heard from Dr. Dimas, most of you had attended the session from KSSK, OJK, and BI, and probably or Minister of Finance, I guess. So it's like you have the full picture, the complete full picture of the KSSK or the Indonesian financial system through this slide. And the role is, of course, as mentioned probably earlier in your earlier session or the other session, is that to monitor and maintain the financial system stability, financial system crisis handling, and systemic bank problem handling. These KSSK has been quite actively performing meetings among the leaders or among the deputies, and some of the meetings have also produced, and most of the meeting, I may say, has produced some action, to do actions, and some follow-ups that most of them also has impacted our daily activities, including also myself in the international affair, as we need also to liaise with or contact with other DIS or other institutional organization as a follow-up of this meeting. So moving on. These are the bank resolution scheme for the non-systemic banks here. As I mentioned, due to the recent regulations in 2006, these are the detailed stages of the resolution process for a non-systemic bank. So there are four options. There are four alternatives of resolution approach. The purchase and assumption, as I mentioned to you, the good asset is there. We passed it into the assuming banks, and the bad asset is being put into a liquidation. And then the bridge bank is on the second part there. The process is also almost similar, whereby we divest or we pass it to the bridge bank, and then for the bad asset we liquidate it. And then moving on to the systemic approach, then the systemic bank. Next slide. Yeah, it's almost the same, but okay. The difference will be on the temporary capital placement side, whereby here the injected capitals should be by involving the previous shareholders, and then yeah, we have all two options, whether to inject the capital by involving the previous shareholders or without involving. But the point is that yeah, the point is that here we only have three options of systemic bank. Instead of the previous one, probably if you may go a little bit shortly into the previous slide, we have three options for the non-systemic bank. So yeah, there is actually the difference between those two. If we may refer to the historical experience that for the temporary capital placement, this is one that we did that time with currently now is it's Bank Mutiara in the past. Yeah, yeah, it's Bank Mutiara, and then that time we did a temporary placement, and then we sold them into an investor from Japan, like after 5 years of trying to resolve them. From the IDIC, I mean, when the IDIC was trying to resolve them. So that was actually the comparison between the systemic and non-systemic bank. In terms of Sharia, I think we have also some Sharia bank also that's being liquidated, but most of them are yeah, I haven't touched about Sharia, but most of them are actually not most of them, all of them is actually on the rural bank side, because the only bank that we liquidate that time is actually from commercial or conventional bank. Okay, moving on to the next slide, perhaps. Okay, these are the position of IDIC in the case SK in terms of the coordinations. You may see here the linkage between the four of the members of the KSSK. And as you may also know in the previous slide, there's a secretariat of KSSK also, which consists of representatives from all institutions in the KSSK. So I think this slide has been covered by other agency as well. But of course, as I still have some slides to catch up, so I think we shall move to the next slide. Of course, if there's something that still unclear, you can feel free to check with me later on or ask me later on. Okay, and these are the recent mandates and authorities based on as a response of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's written in the law number 2 of 2020, whereby IDIC provide deposit insurance for all placement of funds by the government to commercial banks, and 3 additional items whereby is being included in the regulation is that early involvement and preparation in handling the bank, and then placement of funds by IDIC to banks in intensive supervision approaching special surveillance, and extension of the IDIC resolution options for non-systemic bank, which in this case IDIC, the meaning of extension here is, as you mentioned, in the earlier, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, that IDIC as loss minimizer, we used to rely on LCT or the lower cost test, but now because of the pandemic, we have promoted some new approach, or we have opened ourselves to not only refer to the LCT or the lower cost test itself, but also to check on the economic condition, complexity of bank problems, and required handling duration, availability of investor, and other effectiveness of handling problem banks into the parameters when we decide whether we're going to save the bank or we liquidate the bank. So this is actually, personally, this for me, I think this is also the starting point of why we are expected to adopt, a more sophisticated approach of the mandate, which is the risk minimizer mandate, like I mentioned in the past or in the previous slides. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to touch about the international affairs side, and later on, perhaps I will add some recent updates that have been. It's not so international affair related, but it's like an IDIC wide updates for you, which probably more interesting, especially from the university or campus perspective. Okay, IDIC International Affair, here's our position in terms of the stakeholders, overseas stakeholders. We are the member of IADI, as I mentioned, and we are also the member of Islamic Financial Services Board, which these 3 entities I mentioned above. FSB is also indirectly we are a member, because FSB working closely with IADI. FSB is one of the body in the Bank for International Settlement, and both IADI and FSB station their office. I mean, the secretariat of IAD is in BIS. So I may say that these 3 entities in the upper part of the graph or the picture, all of them are standard setting bodies. So for the DI's perspective and the financial stability perspective is on the 2 left-hand side entities, and the Islamic related or Sharia related is on the IFSB, as probably some of you may know. And other entities or other stakeholders, of course, are other multinational organizations. These are World Banks, and then IMF, ASEAN, and then probably SEASEN or ADB or Islamic Development Bank is also some indirect partners of us. And then cooperation with other KSSK, of course, we also in active contact with BI, OJK, and MOF in terms of their policy or international affairs unit. And of course, with the other deposit insurance, the other countries of deposit insurance. And especially with the deposit insurance, we have also maintained, I think, around 15 MOUs. And of course, the MOUs are all related to the knowledge sharing as well as capacity building, so that LPS, in this case, or RDIC, can learn something from other DIS, deposit insurance company, or system, or we can share our expertise to some countries, like I mentioned you earlier, New Zealand, we just establishing the DIS. We also at that time were contacted by our Philippine colleagues to share our experience and background in terms of the establishment of LPS like 15 or 20 years back. So we always try to do this kind of take and give opportunity. So moving on into the next slide. Okay, yeah, this is I'd like to share to you about the IADI. Is one of the, I mean, these are the standard setting body from for deposit insurers or deposit insurance. The mission is there to contribute and to enhance the deposit insurance system effectiveness by promoting guidance and international cooperation. So it's written there that this is exactly a standard setting body for deposit insurance operational, and of course one of them is also including the crisis prevention and also bank resolution. And it was established in 2002 with 225 founding members. And the key products of IADI is the core principles, which was issued in 2009 and revised in 2014. And the CP has been incorporated in IMF, World Bank, FSAP. So probably some of you know that IMF and World Bank has performed like a self-assessment. FSAP is financial self-assessment program, if I'm not wrong, the P, and FSB peer review. So these core principles are being applied as a standard or as a parameter by the World Bank or IMF in terms, and also FSB in terms of performing their review, country review. So probably some of you probably like to Google sometimes. If you like to have, if you have an interest to explore, like probably Saudi Arabia or a country like Turkey, IMF, World Bank, they're performing regularly. They perform FSAP or peer review. So the reports there in the peer review, which is actually, or in the review, which covers the whole financial system. In part of the DIS part or deposit insurer part, they refer to these, core principles. And one of the initiative also of the IADI is to establish or to enhance research and guidance on in terms of such area like funding, financial inclusion, crisis management, asset recoveries. And these numbers now grow into fintech, which also closely relate to financial inclusion, and also climate change. And IAD routinely or provide the survey and database, improve the survey database, and share to the member. One more institution that I would like to add is also the AFI. AFI is association, if I'm not wrong, or Alliance of Financial Inclusion, which based in Malaysia. IADI also work closely with them, and even they have an ongoing joint research with AFI right now. Moving on to the next slide. Okay, I think I have to speed up. Okay, as I mentioned, the product of IID is the core principle. The core principle are on the left-hand side. So points that I mentioned to you earlier about the function or the strategy and etc. That is being adopted by LPS or IIDI is all of them reflected in these core principles. So these core principles are, broken down into several, criteria, essential criteria. They call it ECs. It's a bit very long for me to explain one by one, but probably I'm very happy if one of you or some of you may be interested to have a discussion on these aspects or one of these core principles. But yeah, these core principles are being used by IMF and World Bank when they are doing the review. Moving on to the next slide. These are the involvement of LPS in terms of in the IIDI. So yeah, these names are dispersed from the higher management or the top management, which you may see here in the chart. The chairman himself, Chairman Purbaya, which is also the member of one of the EXCO. EXCO is actually same as Dewan Commissioner in LPS, so it's the ultimate body of the IIDI. So every decision made by IIDI has to pass the EXCO, and Pak Purbaya or Chairman Purbaya is one of the member. And the process of becoming a member is not an easy process because there was a voting and we need to do some lobby to the members of IIDI. And other departments, like our CEO is also used to contribute in the strategic planning. And we have our research director, which is also part of the research technical committee for Asia Pacific region. So moving on, I have to explain about the, okay, probably one slide before, excuse me. Okay, so I have to explain about the regional. Indonesia belongs to the regional of Asia Pacific Regional Committee, as Dr. Herman here is the member of it, especially for the Research and Technical Committee. So we have 8 regions, if I'm not wrong, in IIDI. Sorry, I didn't include it in this slide. It is from APRC, Asia Pacific Regional Committee, and then we have the MENA, Middle East and Northern Africa, and then Eurasia, the Europe and Asia, like Kazakhstan, Turkey, and then some members in the Balkan is also a member in that area. And Europe, a regional committee, we have, that's the 4th regional. We have Africa Regional Committee. And then, okay, we have Caribbean, which the West Indies, I guess, yeah, we call it West Indies. Yeah, and then North America Regional Committee, and then the the Latin America Regional Committee. So we have 8 regional committee, and Indonesia belongs to the Asia Pacific. Moving on into the next slide. Okay, this is a brief explanation about IFSB. IFSB is an international standard setting organization that promotes and enhances soundness and stability of the Islamic financial service industry by issuing global prudential standards. So this, as I mentioned, this is also a standard setting body, but from the Islamic finance perspective, probably, I think most of you know, probably the Secretary General also probably has the experience of doing the same session as mine here in the past. And it's also providing the guiding principle for the industry, and it is broadly acknowledged during the banking and capital markets. We have 2 persons assigned there. Mr. Sofian, which is from the which covering the technical notes. These are the couple of projects, and Dr. Ronald Rolindo, who is actually covering the RFGS. So actually for RFSB, we have just finished a project which is on the next slide. We call it Core Principle for Islamic Deposit Insurance System. So it's a core principle for Islamic deposit insurance. So it is a joint project between IRDI and IFSB. But on this Sharia banking area, actually, I have to use the idiom of my ex-boss, one of my previous bank's boss, that actually my position is I know enough to be dangerous, but due to limitation of personnel at that time, if I may refer to my experience when I did the assignment to IRDI Secretariat, 2 years assignment there, the Secretary General of IRD asked me to support IRD in terms of these CPIDIS projects. So together with Dr. Ronald Rolindo from IDIC or LPS, we work together with the other jurisdiction or other representative, either from IRDI, from IFSB, as well as from other institution like IMF had also sent their representative there in order to establish these core principles. And the reason why of these CPIDS is because Islamic banking is unique. So we need to prepare something that is compliant to the Sharia principle, and then the implementation of Islamic deposit insurance system is also cannot be entertained or cannot be supported by only the conventional part of the standard. And yeah, this is also related to the specialties of the Islamic bank and Sharia governance. So those 3 backgrounds has triggered the establishment of this CPIDIS, which we hope we can provide some set of guidance of core principles, which again can be used by IMF and World Bank in terms of their SAPS activity, as well as in order to for IRDI or IFSB member jurisdiction to do self-assessment reviews in order to improve their organization or improve their functions or operationalities. So moving on to the next slide. Yeah, these are the projects of the development process. I don't want to spend quite long here, but in brief, actually, the outline of CPIDIS, the core principles, actually derived from the core principles of IRDI, because the function itself is a deposit insurance function, but this is on the Sharia aspect. So we added the CP17, which the Sharia governance part there. And the composition is the same plus 1, which is the CP17. And then next, moving on the next slide. The general approach, as I mentioned, is this is adopted from the IRDI-CP, and then it has to be consistent with the IRDI-CP, and there's some points that are being retained, like and we add some parts that relate to the Islamic banks and then the Sharia compliance. But of course, the tough part is actually to get the endorsement from the Sharia board in the IFSB, because this is not an easy part, because of course we have different background of knowledge, and then probably not all of the Sharia board there known how the deposit insurance system is working. But finally, we have managed to get the approval after like 1 or 2 1.5 or 2 years. And finally, the approval was being done, I think, like in 2 or no, 1 month back. I mean, after the Eid, I guess. Yeah, after the Eid, the Sharia Board of IFSB has provided their approval, because the approval has to go on 2 sides. I mean, the leadership of IADI, which in this case, Pak Purbaya was there, Chairman Purbaya was there, which is also not an easy task because most of them are from, conventional and probably non-Islamic, jurisdiction, but we managed to get the approval. And from the, IFSB side, the challenge will be the knowledge of the DIS, as I mentioned earlier. But alhamdulillah, we finally got the approval, like in the next slide, perhaps. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Yeah, these are the future. These are the approval was done. The CBIDS approval was done like last month, and probably a brief updates on the next step will be the handbook, because we need to operationalize these core principles and the handbook. So probably if some students here probably in the final stage of their final assignment or paper, and able to join IDIC. So probably you can contribute later on in the handbook process of these CPIDIS. And these are, as I mentioned to you, I'd like to also share about the other perspective of what are we doing now or probably in the future, as well as some interesting facts or some interesting updates. The mandate and authority development, as I mentioned to you earlier, is currently being scrutinized both here in Indonesia, as I mentioned to you, that we plan to establish or to enhance our mandate towards become a risk minimizer. And but also in the other parts of the world, because the research of the IADI and some other countries has shown some interesting updates that they are now considering to improve or some kind like put the outcome of the research into some valid strategy or valid plan. The second development is the fintech development. Of course, this is not only in the conventional, but also in the Sharia aspect. I think we also see some good, some interesting fintech developments in all part of the world. Technology adoption, automation is also something that is being highly, exposed. Even recently, we have seen some application of drone and also some, drone actually, in terms of the banking or financial usage. I think like 2 months or 2 weeks back, there was a seminar that I attended. I think IID helped that event. And one of the interesting fact is that we have a colleague from Russia who share about the use of drone, which I don't think it's already being being thought over here. But it's already being tested there like 2 years back, and it's being applied. Especially, Russia is one of the countries with probably 6 or 8 time horizon. It's one of the huge country in the world, so they're trying to use a drone in order to add some options in their banking operational, as well as probably on the regulatory side as well. The transition to zero carbon economies also has been something that is being considered. Probably some of you know that like 2 or 3 months back, our Minister of Finance, Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani, has also been invited by one of the, I can't remember, it's the Toronto Center or something, to present updates on climate change and green economy side application in Indonesia. I think she was in the same forum, I guess, with Mark Carney, the ex-governor of Bank of England. Probably if you can check YouTube, you can find it in Toronto Center podcast. Toronto Center is one of the well-known vendor of knowledge or capacity building in central bank or financial regulatory. This is for your information. And also Islamic deposit insurance practice, as I mentioned to you earlier. This is as a follow-up of the CPIDIS, as well as the challenge for Indonesia itself to grow the market of the Sharia banking, to support the government campaign to grow the market size of the Sharia banking, which currently now is still below 10%, which is, of course, being the largest Islamic country. This is something that is also quite thoughtful to be prioritized in the future. And moving on to the next slide, I think we only have like, okay, go ahead. Moving on to this. Yeah, this is something that probably would like, this is not so related to international affairs, of course, I mentioned earlier. This is general updates. We constantly recruit graduates or fresh graduates or professional hire. Yeah, these are the criteria, and actually the process is like here. I think if some of you follow the IDIC Instagram, you may notice that we had an opening like 2 or 3 months back. So, but don't worry, we are still open for probably a later year. I mean, once in a year. So, yeah, we will be very grateful if you can join us. And the next slide, we also have. Oh yeah, these are the system. Of course, it's a standard system. The training system. And then moving on, the interesting part is we have also some scholarship. If I recall correctly, IADI, we have 382, I think, 200, almost 400 employees, and we have so far we have 30 employees that being assigned for a scholarship assignment, which varied from master to doctoral degree. 90% is master degree, and couple of employees that is being assigned to other institution or overseas institution like the IADI. One of them is actually to be assigned, so it's like my replacement. And hopefully the pandemic will be over soon. So she will be assigned to meet up with my old friends in Basel. And then the third employees, so we have 3 employees that assigned, approximately 3 employees that was assigned annually to the, the KSAK Secretariat. So, and almost 5 employees to the other DIC. In this case, is like a short course or secondly, but it's short secondment. So altogether, around 40. So it's like 10% of the total 400, 382 to be precise. Of those employees has been, assigned to other institution or other university for some enhancement or some additional title. So we hope that by sending them towards overseas or adding some experience overseas, we may get the fruit later on, because of course we have to think over the IDIC for a longer time of perspective. So I think it will be interesting. And the list of what you call it, universities out there in the lower part of the slide. So yeah, I think it will be good if some of you may also join us. So I think that's all about Dr. Dimas, my presentation. So sorry, probably I've taken very long. Wow.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Rama, for enlightening presentation and details, comprehensive, excellent. Yeah. So, but before I move to the next session, I'd like to just welcome and greet my LPS colleagues. I know some renowned name here, Pak Rama. There is Pak Ramaditya, Pak Dimas Ramaditya. So he always with us, with UMY. And also some colleagues from LPS. Welcome and thank you for being with us today. So Pak Rama, based on your presentations just now, we can listen and be informed that the LPS basically is the institutions that has strategic and important rules in order to maintain the trust actually from depositors' point of view, so that in the context of financial system stability, this depositors guarantee can make the flows of the funds coming from the customers, banks, and also the other parties becomes conducive and stable in terms of the flows. And another one is that we can take the information from your presentations that the LPS is one of the large associations in the global arena. That I just know actually that the association of the IDIC, not only in Indonesia but also around the world, around the globe. It does mean that the concern of the global for looking at the deposit guarantee becomes increasingly important, not only just for Indonesian context. And thirdly, I got other informations that the LPS here also open scholarship for the employee. So I think it's very interesting for our young generation here that joining these programs. I think you are most invited then to be one of the future leaders of the LPS or IDIC, following the Pak Rama here, who are very enlightening and also very experienced in this area. Okay, Pak Rama, before I move to the participants, meanwhile waiting for their questions, I just want to ask some I want just get some information from you, Pak Rama, is that the first, in terms of the LPS representative, whether every countries in the world has LPS, Pak? Just humble question. And the second question is, you mentioned about the liquidated banks, or by if the asset is not enough to cover the loss of the deposited funds, so the LPS appoint the assuming banks or bridge bank, if I'm not mistaken there. So my question is there any standard durations given by the LPS so that the asset liquidated owned by the banks there must be settled, because we are dealing with the customer's trust, isn't it? In order to safeguard their assets. So is there any durations, Pak? And the last question, just humble question, Pak Rama, is that is LPS also supervising the banks that considered to be microfinance. So nowadays we have so many microfinances. In the case of Islamic finance, we have Betul Mal wa Tamwil, for example. So I just curious to know in detail about that. Thank you, Pak Rama.
Thank you, Dr. Dimas, for the questions. So we're going to ask, to conduct this one by one, or I think I also saw another questions here from Malaysia, I guess.
Okay. So I think Sister Fatin, you can raise your question live to Pak Rama, Mr. Rama. Please, Fatin, introduce yourself, where university you are coming from, and your question, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Fatin Hanani from University Science Islam Malaysia. My question, can we actually compare the Asian financial crisis 1997-1998 with the global economic crisis which we faced from last year until now because of the pandemic COVID-19? Can you share your opinion on this? Because I've read some articles mention that COVID-19 pandemic hit harder than other financial crises that happened before. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sister Fatin. Is there any other questions, or Pak Rama will answer first these questions?
Okay, let me answer. Let me try to answer. Okay, moment. I'll take note first. Okay, thank you, Dr. Dimas. Yeah, I'll try to answer your questions. On the first one was okay. As probably I've touched in earlier, but I think I have to. I have to add some that actually not all Dr. Dimas, not all countries has already adopted the DIS. That is actually, I have to mention to you that there are actually some in IADI. There are some level of members. There are some full member, and there are also some associate members apart from the partner. Partner is like IMF or World Bank, who will not be establishing any deposit insurance systems, but the members are referring to them in terms of doing the assessment or obtaining some inputs from their research. So why we segregate these two kind of membership is because for a member like from an associate members, which is not a fully members, we give them some opportunity to learn about adopting deposit insurance systems in an efficient way. So, which in this case, I have a live example in one of a country in Africa. What they do is usually, before they finally confirm or establish a formal deposit insurance institution, they have their central bank. So it's part of the the function was covered by the central bank, and then when they have already got the personnel in the system and then the operation in place, then they sort of like spin off this entity into a separate deposit insurance. So before they do this spin-off, usually they were a member, associate member, but when they spin off already, then they becoming a full member. So the reason, this is actually one of the example that not all members has already deposit insurance system in place, and also even not all countries has not establish a deposit insurance. And it also shown by one of the committee in the IADI that there's also a member relation council committee, which the function is to approach jurisdiction that has not become a member or have their plan to establish a deposit insurance institution. So this is actually the way we do, or the approach that is being adopted by us in terms of supporting countries that has not established any DIA system. In terms of the tenor, you were asking about the tenor, right? On the resolution process. I have checked with the regulation. It is 4 years plus 1. So if within 4 years we have not able to finish the resolution process, like the way we did perhaps in that time for the Bank Mutiara, then we have another 1 year to finish that process, which finally, which in Mutiara case we finally fulfill that requirement. And I think you mentioned also about Baitul Mal, yeah, Dr.
BMT.
Yeah, BMT. Unfortunately, what we are covering has to be in mirroring with what is being covered by the OJK or the FSA in this case. So because we only resolve bank once it's being declared, cannot be resolved by the FSA. So so long that BMT has an institution of either BPR or commercial bank, BPR ya Pak ya, Bank Perkreditan Rakyat, or a commercial bank, but I don't think there is. So we can cover that. But if it's not, if like a different legal framework as opposed to the what you call it BPR or commercial bank scheme, then we cannot. We unfortunately we don't cover that. Okay. Other questions from
Fatin, Sister Fatin.
From Puan Fatin,
Islam Malaysia.
Oh, Sister Fatin. Yeah, I always call my colleague in Malaysia either Enci or Puan, Dr. Dimas, just to give him a honor or something like that. Yeah, in my personal opinion, there are some differences between the 1998 crisis and now, because in terms of preparedness, I think we are much prepared. This can be shown from the banking performance, even though we have already passed like almost 1.5 years after the crisis. Seems that numbers are still showing a good, performance in average, as opposed to what's being seen in 1997. 1997 and 1998. One of the key differences for me as an ex-banker is that the decision process of the credit, because we have adopted the the 4 I's principle in terms of the credit decision. Everything is being done in a more prudent way. The supervisor activities from the regulators are in much better shape. And in Indonesia, especially in the past, I've seen some approach which, like, the same group providing financing to another sister company, which I don't see that approach as being quite popular recently, this is a good news. So, but of course, in terms of the size itself and the uncertainty, COVID-19 is even worse than 1998. But in terms of what I've seen as an ex-banker, And as a regulatory perspective, with all my limitations, I think we're in quite better shape. But of course, the challenge now is how long is this pandemic, and is there any following strain after this Delta variant? We all hope that this won't be longer than what we had in the flu pandemic like 100 years ago. But of course, nobody can predict. So yeah, inshallah, we're in a better shape, and we're going to finish or we're going to pass this very soon, Dr. Dimas and Puan Fatin. Yeah. Okay. Other questions, perhaps?
Okay.
Or
Okay.
other comments or discussions?
Please, if you have any questions, I saw Brother Jaja here. Want to ask question, please, Jaja. Any other questions?
I think I may add something.
Oh yeah, please.
So first of all, my name is Haja. I'm from IIUM. Assalamualaikum, Doctor. And so what I want to ask is that I want to relate back to the Cyprus and the Greece bank crisis, where depositors cannot withdraw their funds. So how does Indonesia ensure that this event could not repeat again?
Okay.
Okay,
Rama, you want to collect first, or
I think 2 by 2 will be a good approach if
okay, then.
if there is other, but let's probably wait until like 1 or 2 minutes and then I'll answer.
Please.
I can't remember the name. Afwan, do you know the name the lady before? I mean, just now.
Sister Hajar from International Islamic University, Malaysia.
Okay, perfect, Sister Hajar. Puan Hajar.
Okay, any other questions before Mr. Rama asking questions? Okay, Sister Dini, you can raise your question directly to him, please. Oh, okay. So Sister Dini here has a questions. Pak Rama, how does IDC stay resilient and respond towards uncertainty in market conditions in the pandemic COVID-19? Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me answer Sister or Puan Hajar first. Yeah. On the you are referring to the crisis in Greece and Cyprus, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, for us in Indonesia, we actually have think over this during the establishment. So I can't remember the details of the regulations, but we have actually this, but I have explained this to our colleagues in Philippines and especially to New Zealand, as we had a session that time or a Q&A session via email, I guess. So if I can retrieve her email, so probably it will be, yeah. Okay, but you have raised a very good point in terms of whether the example of what you call it, the example of the Greece case and Cyprus case maybe reoccur here in Indonesia. I may say that the possibility of occurrence is still there. Okay, but
what is the possibility of it being there?
The possibility, I may say it depends, but actually the possibility, if it happen, it won't be happen alone in Indonesia. It most likely be happen also like the way it was in 1997. It was actually happen also in Malaysia, I suppose, Thailand, and also some other neighboring countries. But in terms of that case, I may say the likelihood, if I may say, in terms of risk management perspective, is quite small, and we have actually anticipated that in the law of number 24 of 2004, in the article of 81 paragraph 1. Yeah, we actually have a capital of 4 trillion, minimum 4 trillion and a maximum of 8 trillion. So actually there was a question, what is this for? It's because actually we, in case of the IDIC capital is, having some issues in order to fulfill the what you call it, the required amounts of doing the reimbursement. We have also the support from the government of Indonesia in this case. So this is actually one of the game changer, one of the different perspectives that we have think over quite further that time when we established the regulations in 2004. So probably, yeah, we have tried to anticipate that the worst case situation, and yeah. What would be different here is that the Greece and the Cyprus, they have the other European countries that may support them should the worst case happen. But for us, we have to rely on ourselves. But on the other perspective, is that we are equipped with that regulations, so that if things are not, enough, we can. We have the, as mentioned in the regulations, we have the rights to approach the government of Indonesia to support us. But again, based on the current situation that we have, or the current fundings, we may say that if it's not a bigger crisis, it's like one or two banks, we may able to cope that. This is based on my, our recent financial position, if I may say. Perhaps the other one is Puan Dini, right? Dr. Dimas?
Yes, from Dini. Yes, from Dini. It is related with the resiliency and response against existing uncertainty in the market conditions. How IDC respond that one?
Yeah. In terms of resiliency and response, I may say that we are actively in contact with both regulators side, in this case OJK, Central Bank, and Department of Finance, or in the case SK, as well as with the industry. So I think these are the keys in order to be resilient and more responsive in order to anticipate the uncertainty. So things that related to what will be happening in some weeks or some months after now has been predicted. We have also quite strong research team that closely monitoring that trend, as well as capturing the indicators so that we can react before the worst thing happens. We also keep in touch with several neighboring DIS, as well as like probably PIDM from Malaysia, Bank Negara as well, In fact, I have to also mention to you also that one of the way to improve this resilience and flexibility is that on the aspect of the actively in contact is that we are planning actually to do one of the keys to test whether we are flexible enough or adaptable enough towards or we can say it agile in this case. One of the ways also is to to conduct like a stress test or actually I would like to say people are saying that in deposit insurance are actually similar like the fire department the every time if there is no fire or there's no case of fire we sometimes do the training. And this is actually the key that, in my personal perspective, adds some flexibility as well as responsivity in order to the crisis. And if I may update you, that we are also right now planning to do not only local stress tests, but in very short coming months, we also about to do a regional crisis simulation test together with the neighboring countries, which again this is conducted or prepared by the standard setting bodies, which is the Financial Stability Institute. So I think this is also one of the key, apart from the MOUs with other countries and also MOUs with some other like Association of Banks or rural banks, as well as other important partners, as well as routine dialogue and meetings with the KSSK members. So I hope that answered the questions.
Okay.
Sorry,
Pak Rama.
Indah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Puan Dini, excuse me.
Yes, Pak Rama.
Yeah, I hope that answered the questions from Kak Dini or Sister Dini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Puan Dini.
Puan Dini. Ah, yeah, Puan Dini. Oh, she's a Malaysian also. Dari Malaysia juga ya?
I stay in Malaysia for almost 10 years, Pak Rama.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, so I guess you know Pak Ronald, yeah, Dr. Ronald and some
Yeah,
other.
he's my senior at AIUM.
Okay. Small world. I was actually in contact with KNAKS, I think, last year. So yeah, there's a lot of friends there as well.
Yeah. Okay, Pak Rama and dear participants, I guess that you have so many questions in mind related with the LPS or IDIC, but I think the time is run out. Is out of the time. The time is up. Yeah. I do sure Pak Rama still have so many explanations, sharing, and knowledge, but the time is limited, and I don't want to take the time of Pak Rama in the weekend, almost a weekend.
So we still have some time for weekend.
Okay, Pak Rama, before we end the sessions, we want to get your advice, Pak Rama, for young generations, such including myself. So, what should be the young generations be prepared or done so that in the future they can face the challenges and resilience for whatever shocks coming in, Pak Rama, based on your humble experience, Pak.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dimas. I think for me, one of the wise advice from my ex-boss is, he always say that during a client meeting, I was the salesman that time together with him. He was my boss. He always said, we always keep raising our bar. We have to keep raising our standard. Yeah, because we never want to be easily get complacent or get satisfied what we have now. Especially now, worlds are changing, challenges are coming even from a perspective or from an angle that we never identified before, like this pandemic. And also, as I also referring to you, Dr. Dimas, as I believe you're from Malaysian graduate, and it's I think it's a Sharia, I guess, yeah, Sharia finance also, or what?
Yeah, Sharia finance.
So I believe you're very fluent in Arabic, no? No, I mean, this is actually also part of me. I mean, I always ask my daughter here, or my son, yeah, in line with keep raising our bar. I mean, we have to master something. I mean, we don't have to. We shouldn't have to rely only on academic or academic approach, but we have to rely for two others capabilities. In the case of my kids, I always ask them to master a third language in this case. So you don't have to get satisfied with just only one or two language, especially us in Indonesia. Unfortunately, you may all know that in Arab, we don't see Indonesian word, but we only see Malaysian word, right? This has put our position, unfortunately, in not so good position as opposed to the people from our neighbors. But even though we have that, even though we are in the position of like in our neighbors, we still have to add some challenge. We never be easily satisfied. So I always challenge my kids to master a third language. That will be if they are a linguist. But if some of you may not a linguist enough, of course, there's another capabilities, like probably to cook, or to based on your hobby, you do some sport or something like that. So I think it will be. I think that is my suggestion. Dr. Dimas, it's, keep raising yourself, keep raising the standard of yourself, and then I think mastering a third language would be a good way. Yeah.
Okay.
Inshallah. Thank you, Dr. Dimas. It was very nice
Pak
to meet you.
Thank you. Terima kasih. Sukron
Terima
for
kasih.
your time with us. For
Yeah, thank you
2
very
hours.
much.
We have been with Pak Rama, and we finally understood that the task of LPS is very important. And hopefully, having finished these discussions, all participants here can further promote and digest what he has presented, and try to articulate with the other perspective, so that in the future, if you were the future leaders, then you can become better compared with the last generations. Before we end the sessions, on the behalf of International Program for Islamic Economics and Finance, Department of Economics, Faculty of Economic and Business, UMY, would like to again, Pak Rama would like to express our deep thanks, sincere appreciations to all that, to you, and also the team that attending with us. If I may mention one by one, we have here Pak Gilang, Bu Dewi, Pak Dimas Radityo, Ibu Amirah, ya, Bu Vina, and Bu Nadia, who has been with us. Hopefully, this Pak Dimas. Hopefully,
apa kabar? How are you? Pak Dimas juga.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of Dimas here. Dimas reunion.
Pak Dimas ini Pak Rama sangat dekat dengan kami. Kemarin beliau baru diskusi juga dengan kami terkait dengan mahasiswa KL Pak, dan juga MOU Pak dengan kami.
Iya Pak. Wah, jadi pas ya kami dari arahan Kepala Eksekutif Mas Rama sebagai narasumbernya cukup pas nih, jelas pas nih.
Iya. Baik.
Terima kasih loh Mas Rama juga.
Sama-sama Pak Dimas. Pak Dimas ini kita nyebutnya Dandim nih. Dr. Dimas. Komandan Dimas.
Baik Pak Dimas, Pak Rama, and other participants. I think we have been in the end of the sessions. Let me close this session by reciting Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. We wish that we will have so many collaboration with LPS ahead under supervision of Pak Rama, Pak Dimas, and others. And inshallah, UMY committed to further collaborate with LPS in other areas, including research, academics, and also lectures, inshallah.
Yeah,
With
I have
that,
my emails also. I've written down it in the chat, so please feel free to contact me directly.
Okay, inshallah, Pak Rama.
Inshallah.
With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ya, stay safe and healthy.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih Pak Dimas.
Thank you Pak Rama. Thank you Pak Dimas. Thank you. See you again ya Pak Dimas. For the next step. For the next event ini Pak Dimas, MOU-nya ya Pak Dimas.
Ya, segera Pak Dimas.
Ya. Oke. Mbak Vina itu nanti yang dikejar-kejar Pak.
Ini sama LPS belum selesai. Masih di meja Pak Rektor Pak.
Baik.
Baik,
Dimas.
Kami izin live ya Pak Dimas dan
monggo.
Dr. Dimas.